What do you have to say to me?
Bro, I watched a scary movie with him.
Bro,
I'm gonna have to shut this podcast
not
off.
yet.
Run
Not yet.
away.
Welcome to Watch Mojo. And today we're counting down our picks for the most uncomfortable and confrontational moments on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Fury is not a real boxer.
Of course he's a real boxer.
No chance.
He's a professional boxer.
Number 30, Young Jamie Gets It.
The early vote more than all of the vote from
No, it was
some years?
Oh,
Yes,
some
that's what I was
years,
going to say. For Texas
How about
specifically.
you let him answer since he's the f***ing expert?
Jamie Vernon, more playfully known as Young Jamie, has been with the show since 2012, so he obviously gets along well with Rogan. But there are times when tempers start to flare, like in End of the World number 2 with Joe Rogan hosting both Tim Dillon and political activist Kyle Kulinski. Kulinski is talking about the then upcoming election between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, prompting Rogan to ask a question about voting. Young Jamie answers Joe instead of Kulinski, prompting Joe to not so jokingly chastise him. A little bit of bickering and laughing follows, and all Kulinski can do is awkwardly giggle.
You're looking at me.
Jamie's like, no.
For Texas specifically, yes.
Number 29, Stephen Greer.
You're putting me in the hot seat early, man.
Well, you have to. When you say that you can do that, I mean, somehow or another, you have to, without getting anybody killed, you have to explain.
Many people come to the Joe Rogan Experience to hear about aliens and conspiracy theories. And if that's what you're into, then let us turn you towards Stephen Greer. Greer is a prominent ufologist, known as the founder of the Disclosure Project and the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And boy, did he have some stories for Rogan. It's a great conversation, but Greer's topics can get pretty wild. And there are some that Rogan just isn't having. He is quite skeptical throughout the podcast, constantly pushing back against Greer and questioning his many bizarre claims. Things never get outright confrontational, but there's an undercurrent of tension that never really goes away.
Well, but of the creationist view, not all those people think
Right.
the world is 10,000 years old. I think that number's only about
10,000
15%.
years, though. They're saying 10,000 years. This is what, in this study, the gal studied.
Number 28, Les Stroud.
They can control cameras.
So the crazy, they can control electronics. They can do infrasound and screw you up like a lion or a tiger. The crazy.
Back in 2015, Rogan hosted the Survivor Man himself, Les Stroud. Stroud is a nature enthusiast and survival expert, so the conversation naturally turns to cryptids. Stroud recalls some weird experiences that he's had in the wild, which for some reason earns the complete ire of Rogan, who is usually into that sort of thing. The two fight about the existence of Bigfoot, and the rest of the podcast is bizarrely uncomfortable, with listeners noting Rogan's annoyingly arrogant attitude and constant ramblings. Stroud eventually just checks out, likely sick of the bickering and constant interjections.
What if it wasn't? What if it wasn't a human?
Bigfoot?
What
Well,
if-
listen,
if it wasn't a human, then what was it?
Number 27, Stefan Molyneux.
That's what laws are, though.
But
If you
is-
disobey laws and you
but
resist a
only,
police officer,
but
then you're
which,
dead.
But, well, sort of. I mean, which laws are you talking about?
A deeply controversial guest, Stefan Molyneux is considered a major figure of the alt-right movement, a known white nationalist and, some may say, cult leader who has been banned from the likes of YouTube and SoundCloud, and maybe Joe Rogan as well. Molyneux was a semi-regular in the early days of the podcast, having appeared 3 different times in rapid succession. But by episode 538, you could tell that Rogan was getting sick of the shtick. He was actively fighting back against many of Molyneux's outlandish claims, and tensions were growing quite hot. To the surprise of absolutely no one, Molyneux has never been back.
That is a incredibly generalized position.
But you're boiling down like I gave you a sort of very compressed speech.
you did there right now.
Number 26, Seth Dillon.
I'm just saying that. I'm just saying that's
understand what
real
you're
too.
saying?
Yeah, I understand. I understand
But
what you're
do you
saying.
understand what I'm saying?
Since 2018, Seth Dillon has been the owner and CEO of the Babylon Bee, which is basically the conservative version of The Onion. The website has deep ties to Christianity, so as you can imagine, its owner does not look kindly on abortion. The topic comes up during his visit with the more liberal-minded Rogan, and oh boy does it get testy. Pro-choice battles pro-life, and as abortion is such a sensitive topic, both sides get quite defensive in their arguments. Things even take a turn for the personal, with Rogan using his own children as a catalyst for the broader pro-choice argument.
That's also what makes it a very, very messy conversation.
It's tough.
Number 25, Matt Walsh.
I'm not advocating for like a law that says that you if you're married you have to have X number of kids.
But then why are you opposed to two gay people doing that?
Back in November of 2022, Rogan hosted Matt Walsh, a right-wing commentator for the Daily Wire and the man behind controversial documentaries like What is a Woman? But in this case, the discussion is not about gender ideology, but gay marriage. Walsh is a staunch critic of the LGBTQIA+ rights movement, and he makes his stance known on the Joe Rogan Experience. Rogan disagrees with his guest, claiming that two men should have the legal and moral right to get married. It's more of a disagreement than an argument, as things never turn outright hostile. But the discussion goes on for quite a long time, and neither side gives an inch in their beliefs.
It's a human-invented thing. If we decide that gay people can get married too, I just don't see how it damages anything.
Number 24, Moxie Marlinspike.
You were so confident until just now. We could pick a month, few months off.
That's ridiculous to flip a coin on that. There's no chance.
A tech guru, Moxie Marlinspike is deep into cryptology, being Twitter's former head of security and the co-author of the encryption used by Google and Facebook. He's also really good at rock, paper, scissors. So, talented man. Marlinspike bets Rogan that he can beat him, claiming that if he wins, he gets to do a week's worth of programming on Joe's show. Rogan immediately gets defensive and shuts the bet down, claiming that it's worth far too much money to risk. There's a fine line between pride and arrogance, and some viewers don't think that Rogan walked it.
Well, do you think that there's something of equivalent value?
No.
There's
nothing
that I can do.
There's nothing that you could give me that would be worth a week of programming on the show. What are you going to give me?
Number 23, David Portnoy.
Can you find me the record of
Watch this. Stop. Watch this.
Rogan is very passionate about many things, and combat sports is certainly one of them. For those who don't know, Rogan is a commentator for the UFC and has a rich knowledge of MMA and boxing, which comes up in his discussion with Barstool Sports founder David Portnoy. They discuss the merits of Tommy Fury, a boxer who fights popular influencers like Jake Paul and KSI. Portnoy doesn't think that Fury is a real boxer, as he lacks genuine talent and lives in the shadow of his older brother, Tyson, who was once the heavyweight champion. Rogan disagrees, arguing that Tommy has obvious skill and that Tyson should not factor into the discussion. Lots of yelling, cursing, and overlapping occurs. It gets pretty crazy.
You're out of your mind if you don't look at this.
What
look at that right hand.
That was in slow motion.
No.
Number 22, Alex Jones and Eddie Bravo.
Listen, we're going to get to this next, and I respect you.
Hey, I want you guys to yell at each other for 3 minutes while I go pee.
For many fans, episode 1255 is peak Joe Rogan Experience. The date, February 28th, 2019. The guests, Eddie Bravo and the ever-controversial Alex Jones. The topics? Oh boy, where do we even start? Tower 7, toxoplasmosis, God, you name it, they talked about it. Or should we say, yelled about it. The whole episode is nearly 5 hours of nonsensical, conspiracy-laden ramblings, with many a passionate argument thrown in for good measure. It's one of those conversations where you can tell the participants are good friends, but who consistently bicker like salty coworkers. It's a glorious listen.
They're admitting it.
Jamie pulled some shit up on Google.
They admit it now.
That's
they're
you two.
They're normalizing it. No, the governor. Listen to me.
Number 21, Dibble versus Hancock.
Like, I came here to have a respectful conversation.
Yeah.
I want to be very clear about this, Graham. I have critiqued the sources that you have used, and I've critiqued the evidence that you used.
In one corner, Flint Dibble, a professional archaeologist. In the other, Graham Hancock, a pseudoscientist and the man behind the hotly debated Ancient Apocalypse. Fight. No, really, fight, because these two go at it like you wouldn't believe. Spanning 4.5 hours, the podcast begins friendly enough, with both sides respecting each other and what they bring to the archaeological discussion. But friendliness soon turns to hostility, with Dibble showing disbelief at Hancock's outrageous claims and pseudo-scientific approaches. We're not sure if it's hilarious or painfully awkward, but either way, it sure makes for one tantalizing listen.
And I've showed you the kind of big data evidence that we actually have, which disproves your entire civilization.
Let's have a look at, it doesn't disprove my entire civilization. How could you possibly do that?
Number 20, Eddie Bravo. Martial arts instructor Eddie Bravo is a popular reoccurring guest on the Joe Rogan Experience, made famous by his outlandish conspiracy theories. In this case, he's discussing nuclear bombs. Bravo, Rogan, and fellow guest Brendan Schaub discuss the conspiracy theory that nukes are fake and that no one has ever actually gone off. Bravo brings up some bizarre questions. Everyone talks over each other, and Rogan claims that Bravo is wasting everyone's time by arguing against their existence.
You're going down a rabbit hole for no reason. You're wasting all this time. How do you know? How do you know? How do you know? I don't need to know.
What do you care about me wasting my time?
Well,
I could waste my time on whatever. Why are you so concerned? Why are you so concerned about me wasting my time?
Because you waste our time too.
Even the usually mild-mannered Jamie Vernon gets in on the action and raises his voice against Bravo. Everyone's worked up, and the bickering makes for some delightfully awkward entertainment.
I mean, if you want the answers, you can go get them. It's not just question the world.
This is why it's frustrating, because you don't want the answers. You just want to question everything that the, in air quotes, government says.
Number 19, Joey Diaz.
And this is it. This is it, because it's time. We're not taking it no more.
Stand-up comedian Joey Diaz is another reoccurring guest on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he has been since the podcast's early days. Rogan brings up the idea of controversial jokes in the midst of the Me Too movement and asks Diaz if he's noticed a change in the comedic landscape. Diaz almost immediately gets heated, goes red in the face, and starts defending the use of creative freedom in comedy. He also claims that it's too late for him to stop using certain offensive words, as he grew up when they were widely used. There's no real argument here. It's just Diaz going off for 5 minutes about something that he is clearly very passionate about.
There's always that one comic that wants to be shocking. No, I'm not here to be shocking. I'm here to tell you how I see it. You want to hear how I see it? This is how I see it.
Number 18, Jan Irvin. We're going way back for this one. Episode 119 was released on July 5th, 2011, and featured both Brian Redban and Jan Irvin. Irvin is another conspiracy theorist, and he hoped to speak to Rogan about some of his beliefs. Irvin got very academic with it and brought along tons of citations and sources, but it was all a little too much for the host.
Dude,
that's why you need to get a Twitter.
You go too far. You go too far. You go too far down to this guy, that guy. I got to take notes on names.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Like, honestly, to me, it's like you start saying all these names and stuff, and I'm so confused because I don't know any of these names.
Fans claim that Rogan got irritated with the conversation and that he essentially tuned out after a while. This is quite a contentious episode of the Joe Rogan Experience as fans debate the merits of Irvin's arguments and Rogan's treatment of him. Number 17, Kurt Metzger. The recipient of numerous Emmy nominations, Kurt Metzger found great success writing for the sketch comedy program Inside Amy Schumer. Schumer came under fire in the mid-2010s and was accused of plagiarizing jokes from other comedians. This is brought up during Metzger's appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, and it results in quite the argument.
Hey, I'm not going to them. Take the sheriff. Wait. I'm not going to them. They're coming to me.
Metzger passionately defends Schumer from the accusations, while Rogan contends that her jokes bore close resemblances to those of other comedians. Metzger is clearly fired up, and Rogan even tells him to chill out and stop being so confrontational.
Dude, relax.
I drank two caveman nitros, and you're talking to me this way.
Whether it was the energy drinks or just unfiltered emotion, this conversation is rapid and intense. Number 16, Michaela Peterson. Joe Rogan is deeply into health and exercise, so it makes sense that he speaks passionately on the subject. His guest in the episode is Michaela Peterson, a podcaster and the daughter of famous psychologist and internet celebrity Jordan Peterson. Peterson argues that overweight individuals don't have the energy to exercise.
Some of them maybe, but I think some of them just don't have discipline. There's an issue with that as well.
Rogan vehemently disagrees and goes on a feverish tangent about discipline. He argues for the merits of focus and forced adherence to routine. And he believes that those who don't exercise often make excuses.
But people like to give themselves this excuse. I do not have the energy to do this. Whatever. If you decide that, that's true.
It's quite a lengthy argument, and Rogan never quite sees eye to eye with Peterson, who remains steadfast in her own opinion. Number 15, Tom DeLonge. Blink-182's Tom DeLonge is a big believer in extraterrestrial activity and discussed UFOs at length on the podcast. Unfortunately, it seems like Rogan wasn't having any of it.
Where are you getting this from?
Well, take a wild guess. Look at the people I'm surrounded by,
So the people you're surrounded by are telling you this? Is that what it is?
Some fans are of the opinion that Rogan was rude towards DeLonge and that he was overly annoyed with his bizarre claims. It never comes to screams or shouts, but it's clear that Rogan is simply humoring his guest.
How would they manage this then? These regular dudes without access to communication like you have, how have they managed to disseminate this information and sort of confuse everybody?
This was seemingly confirmed in a later episode with Kristen Ball and Sajar and Jetty, in which Rogan jokingly claimed that something's wrong with DeLonge. Number 14, Brian Redban. From the show's premiere in 2009 to 2012, the Joe Rogan Experience was produced and semi-hosted by Brian Redban. Unfortunately, he went out on a bit of an awkward note. Redban had a penchant for interrupting, and in this case, it got him in trouble. Near the end of number 415 with Justin Foster, Redban brings up some positive reception that he recently received for his stand-up. Rogan saw this as bragging, resulting in some long and awkward bickering between the two. Foster does what he can to diffuse the palpable tension, but there's no hope, and the argument carries on far longer than it needs to. It wasn't long after this that Redban was permanently replaced by Jamie Vernon. Number 13, Brian Callen. Comedian Brian Callen frequently collaborates with Joe Rogan, but that doesn't stop them from bickering like a married couple. The conversation turns to schoolyard jerks, and Callen makes some bold claims about what he'd do in this position. Rogan and guest Brendan Schaub immediately gang up on him and call out his faux tough guy persona.
Here's the problem. You've talked to too many guys that let you say shit like that, and then it becomes like vernacular.
Rogan and guest Brendan Schaub immediately gang up on him and call out his faux tough guy persona. They lovingly but firmly tell him to cut out the theatrics, and Rogan makes the argument that he's been hanging out with too many toxic people that have warped his beliefs. It's 3 straight minutes of Rogan and Schaub ripping into Callen and completely dismantling his ego.
You do. You hang out with a lot of people that are such bullshit artists.
No, I
and
don't.
You don't.
My
Yes,
good
you do.
friends? No.
You know people.
who I'm talking about.
You have friends that are bullshit artists.
Number 12, Andrew Hill. Episode number 629 hosted neuroscientist Andrew Hill. And like many episodes of the podcast, the conversation turned to fighting. They debate the merits of Aikido, a Japanese martial art that is practiced in well over 100 countries around the world.
That's reality. This shit doesn't work. And it's a beautiful art to practice. It looks cool, but it's like as far as like efficacy and actual grappling against I just think as far as an actual martial art, it's one of the least effective in real practice.
Rogan argues that it's one of the least effective martial arts, whereas Hill claims that it has other benefits beside direct hand-to-hand combat. This results in quite a fierce debate, and while it never gets confrontational, it's clear that neither side is backing down from their firm beliefs. It's an inherent clash of personality and opinion, and it's very clear that Rogan doesn't put much stock in what Hill is saying.
You're buying some mumbo jumbo, pal. I think they got you.
Maybe they do. Maybe I've been indoctrinated.
Number 11, Mark Gordon. Dr. Mark Gordon was the guest of the Joe Rogan Experience, number 438, and the conversation quickly turned to supplements and hangovers. Gordon claims that an antioxidant called glutathione can help cure hangovers, and maybe even prevent the side effects of alcohol consumption altogether. Rogan couldn't believe what he was hearing and calmly shared his strong skepticism. He even expressed a desire to call Gordon on his claims, but he felt that he wasn't knowledgeable enough to do so. Glutathione has indeed been proven to help with fatty liver disease, and it has many other health benefits. Curing hangovers may or may not be one of them. Number 10, Nick DiPaolo. Conservative comedian Nick DiPaolo is known for his strong political opinions, his appearances on popular radio shows like Opie and Anthony and The Howard Stern Show, as well as his daily podcast, The Nick DiPaolo Show. While appearing on Rogan, he and the host began arguing about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Rogan stated that Trump was a persistent liar, but DiPaolo begged to differ, sarcastically undermining sources like the Washington Post.
What are you pulling up?
I don't know.
Washington Post?
DiPaolo held the opinion that the mainstream media was twisting Trump's words, even asking Rogan at one point to define lie.
Lies about what? First of all, what's the definition of a lie?
Fed up with his lack of solid arguments or, anything resembling facts, Rogan accused DiPaolo of resorting to whataboutism.
A whataboutism?
Yeah, when someone talks about something and instead of refuting it with facts, they go, yeah, well, what about Hillary? What about Bill? Bill did it too. What about this? What about that?
You're gonna tell me
whataboutism.
That's what I just committed.
Number 9, Jamie Kilstein. We're going way back for this one.
So it's an unfair comparison. But murder's worse.
Rogan and visiting comedian Jamie Kilstein began discussing whether it was appropriate to make jokes about sexual assault, which eventually spiraled into a heated debate. The argument turned to whether assault or murder was the worst crime, with Rogan arguing that murder is worse. Kilstein countered that there's a stigma attached to being assaulted and that the victims are forced to live with the trauma.
It is worse. Murder's worse.
This results in one of the rare moments in which Rogan truly loses his temper. He actually yells at Kilstein, calls him crazy, and tells him that he's talking nonsense.
Jamie, you're talking nonsense. You keep bringing up feelings, keep going to weird shit and victimization.
The fact that Kilstein later had to leave his internet radio show, Citizen Radio, due to manipulative, emotionally abusive, and predatory behavior towards women just adds another level of awkwardness to it all. Number 8, Milo Yiannopoulos. Perhaps one of the most controversial figures of our day, to put it both mildly and kindly, Milo Yiannopoulos is a prominent far-right figure who once served as the editor of Breitbart News.
So you're not religious?
No, I believe. I don't necessarily go to mass all the time, but I
do
believe.
What?
I'm a Catholic. I would call myself a Catholic. Yeah.
He holds many contentious opinions, has been banned from numerous social media sites, including Twitter and Facebook, and left Breitbart amid accusations that he supported romantic relationships between adults and children. Presumably, all of that contributed to Rogan's very confrontational approach to his conversation with Milo. The topic turned to Christianity, with Yiannopoulos describing himself as a Catholic. Rogan mocked Yiannopoulos' beliefs, and Yiannopoulos attempted to end the conversation then and there.
So a dude dressed like a wizard sitting on a golden throne.
All right, we're done.
And you have to call him father.
However, they both continued to prod, resulting in an awkward and heated conversation about the merits of religion.
This is individual. To treat religion with the amount of contempt you do. This is what assholes do. This is
not what assholes
mediocre
do. Mediocre
intelligence,
is
militant
exactly what you
atheists
accuse
do.
feminists of doing.
No, it's not.
You're distorting the argument.
Number 7, Jack Dorsey, Vijay Gotti, and Tim Pool. While Jack Dorsey is comparatively tame compared to Rogan's usual guests, that doesn't mean his appearances on the show went as planned for anyone involved.
Is there any consideration to expanding it further?
Not right now. We're.
How about 1 million characters? No?
The first episode with Dorsey was a disaster, with fans deeming it dull and dissing Rogan's lack of confrontation. This prompted Rogan to apologize on his show.
I didn't think the podcast would create such a controversy, but that's probably poor prior planning on my part.
It also resulted in a massive course correction. Dorsey returned to the podcast with Twitter's chief legal officer, Vijay Gotti, answering questions from anti-corporate political commentator Tim Pool. The episode lasted 3.5 hours, with Pool warning of a snowflake avalanche and arguing that Twitter uses its ban on hate speech to discriminate against conservatives.
But on the surface,
the concern is that this is always leaning towards the left.
Oh, it absolutely is, and I'm not even getting started.
The conversation was tense, to say the least. Number 6, Stephan Guyenet and Gary Taubes.
Now, what is your disagreement with Gary's position?
Everything? American journalist Gary Taubes is a questionable figure in the field of diet research. Some of his views surrounding carbohydrates, insulin, and obesity have been repeatedly criticized, with books like Good Calories, Bad Calories receiving mixed reviews from mainstream publications. This is mirrored in Taub's conversation with neuroscientist and diet expert Stephan Guyenet, who penned the acclaimed 2017 book, The Hungry Brain. He and Taubes get into a very heated argument regarding obesity and insulin resistance, with Guyenet going on a near 20-minute tangent about the science behind fat storage.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
As long as it's very brief.
Just a question. I still don't quite understand what the model is.
Okay,
I mean, I understand
how about
the
this?
dysregulation of the brain with the environment.
If you don't understand the model, how about I finish laying it out and then you can ask a question.
The whole episode was tense and hostile, complete with high levels of pettiness and rude condescension.
We should really talk about this because that's incorrect.
It's in the textbooks.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about what's in the textbook. Don't worry, Gary.
Number 5, Eddie Bravo. Despite being an expert martial artist and founder of his own style of jiu-jitsu, Eddie Bravo is perhaps most well known for his hilarious and often inane ramblings on the Joe Rogan Experience.
In general, it's history, science, education, energy. Everything has always been controlled by the government since day one.
Bravo is a prominent conspiracy theorist and one of the most outspoken proponents of the flat earth theory.
Have a
People
seat,
get-
have
people
some
get
coffee.
knocked down
My name's Eddie, and I
one
believe
by
the Earth's
one. They're
flat.
getting knocked
Hi,
down.
Eddie.
All you gotta do is look
Eddie,
into
they're
it.
not. They're not.
This belief results in an uncomfortable moment on the Joe Rogan Experience, as Rogan dismantles Bravo's belief, his sources of information, and the flat earth theory in general. The argument eventually devolves into incomprehensible screaming.
Eddie.
I used to say the same
Eddie,
stuff.
you're talking about the
I
Earth being
said this-
flat.
I'm
Thousands of
saying the
scientists
same
have
thing.
looked into it. You think they're all wrong?
Rogan eventually calls Bravo's beliefs insane. His frustration is readily apparent. Number 4, Candace Owens. Candace Owens has earned fame and controversy for her pro-Trump politics and outspoken criticism of Black Lives Matter.
Like, Trump came in and was like, no, like, America.
Owens became national news after the perpetrator of the tragic events in Christchurch in 2019 explicitly mentioned Owens and her influence on him. However, despite her contentious views on everything from race and gun control to queer rights, women's rights, immigration, and the COVID-19 pandemic, it was her flippant comment denying the existence of climate change that prompted a vicious argument between host and guest.
This is the climate change? Yes, the climate changes. It was different weather yesterday than it was today.
Rogan proceeded to bring up scientific studies, exposing her as uninformed and warning her to be careful what she says owing to her public influence.
How about not have a belief until you really have
okay,
looked
so
at the
you
data?
would prefer if my language, as opposed to admitting that I do not know this, I wouldn't die on this hill, I've never made a video, I've never made a public statement, you would have preferred if I had just started by saying I have no opinion.
Number 3, Adam Conover. This famous comedian is perhaps best known as the host of Adam Ruins Everything, an educational comedy program that sees Conover debunking popular myths and misconceptions. While appearing on the Joe Rogan Experience, Conover and Rogan begin to discuss the idea of trans athletes in professional sports.
There's a bunch of advantages in terms of reaction time that males enjoy. It's some significant difference in reaction time between males and even untrained males versus female professional athletes.
Outdated terminology notwithstanding, Conover and Rogan represent two distinct sides of the topic, with the guest asserting that sporting events should be as inclusive as possible, and the host postulating that trans athletes would have an unfair advantage over their competition.
People don't know who they are. A 7-year-old, people don't even give their 7-year-old phones.
The debate only intensifies when the conversation shifts to the topic of children and gender-confirming hormone therapy.
I don't think there's research that shows the positive benefits of children transitioning. I don't think that exists.
Well, we can't solve that in this conversation right here.
Number 2, Brian Dunning.
I read about you. Coming. No, nothing's coming.
The infamous episode featuring author Brian Dunning was contentious and aggressive from the start. Dunning often writes and speaks on scientific skepticism, being the author of numerous books and the host of the long-running podcast Skeptoid. In 2008, Dunning included Rogan on a list he wrote titled 10 Most Wanted Celebrities Who Promote Harmful Pseudoscience. Rogan is irritated from the start, and he continuously counters Dunning's talking points.
Well, it's just factually inaccurate on so many different levels. I don't understand why you wrote it like that.
This includes Dunning's claim that the reason you poop and pee is because you ate more than you needed. Rogan is typically quite cordial and welcoming to his guests, even the most controversial ones. But in this case, listeners and viewers could feel the tense hostility.
I could turn this around on you and say it would be so easy for you to research all those different things on that list that you accuse me of, many of them which are not true at all and never have been true, but yet you printed them.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Steven Crowder. Depending on who you ask, Steven Crowder is either a popular conservative commentator known for his contributions to Fox News and daily political show Louder and Crowder, or a racist, homophobic, white supremacist, and neo-Nazi who has had his content demonetized by YouTube on more than one occasion. Rogan and Crowder enjoyed a few drinks throughout this episode, which certainly added to the unhinged animosity between them.
Hold on. Stop.
No, hold on a second. This is
you
because you just
interrupt way too much.
No,
you need to stop.
You talk
Hold
in
on
paragraphs.
a second. No. I don't talk in
Go
paragraphs.
ahead.
I make full points.
The topic of conversation veered towards marijuana use and legalization, with Rogan arguing for its use.
Since marijuana legalization, highway fatalities in Colorado
Since you
are
called me
at
hold on a second. Since you called me
A debate regarding marijuana quickly spiraled into a full-on 40-minute argument, with Crowder insulting Rogan and Rogan throwing back patronizing names like cutie and sweetie.
For some reason, you're turning it into something hostile that it really doesn't need
It's
to be.
not hostile.
It is. It
Might
is.
be to you.
Yeah, it is.
You feel weird about it. I feel great.
It is.
Rogan later issued an apology through Instagram, writing, "Well, this one went off the rails for a while." Yeah, that's one way to put it. Did you cringe watching these? Let us know in the comments below.
I'm getting pissed now.
Don't get pissed.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.